So, audience, today we are here with Roy from Wellspring Herpsprings Herpetculture and the Herpetculture Podcast. Now, before we get into this, I would like to do some housekeeping. Okay, I would like to thank Dylan from Animals at Home because he's a great guy. I would like to thank Deadpool and Lady Death. I would like to thank God and my mother and my father. And let's incorporate everybody in the world. I would like to thank, and just like, I would like to thank my animals for being here. I would just like to, So let's get into it now. How was that? Is that how?
That was great. You nailed it.
How does it feel to have somebody hold you up?
Feels fair.
I love it though. Like I didn't realize until you did that episode with Liam. I didn't realize that you guys were like doing it on the fly. I thought it was pre-recorded. I was like, serious?
Yeah. No, we used to do it pre-recorded, but the problem with that is that it just gets super stagnant and kind of weird. And so I've always asked the guests, is it okay if we just do it? And folks are usually okay just sitting for a minute while I do go through that spiel and try to get through it as fast as I can. But you know how it goes.
I do actually. Well, I don't really, because nobody really invites me or talks to me. It's okay. I'm just that crazy guy from Missouri.
Missouri is a good place to be, though, for herps.
It is, actually. I was surprised at some of the herps that we have here. I didn't know some of these herps that we had here. And I'm from the backwoods of Missouri. Like, I'm from Southwest Missouri. I grew up on a highway. You walk a mile into the woods, you were in Arkansas. But you had to go 2 miles because like that. Like, I literally grew up and you didn't see a neighbor's until it was winter. And then you could see the neighbors' houses through the trees.
Yeah.
Like it just far out there in the middle of nowhere. We had creeks and we say wash and all that stuff. So
I like that. My dad says wash. He grew up in Idaho though. But
there was a famous person that was really smart that I heard say wash the other day. And I was like, that just made my day. I do too. And I have a lot of respect for you guys, what you do.
Thanks.
Today, I want to make sure, because we talked about this earlier, interrupt me at every opportunity you can. Tell me how shitty I am every opportunity you can. Make questions to everything I say if you have them. One of the reasons I actually want Roy on so badly is the fact that he will do that. We know that he'll do that. It's like, no. And he'll be like an audience surrogate because I have a lot of knowledge collected over years that there was like one instance where it was like, oh, there's a mosquito that was genetically engineered that his offspring would explode in larva state. You ever heard of that?
Oh, I think I have heard of that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, years ago I heard of it.
Faint bell in my memory. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was before I even went to college. It was so far back. Mm-hmm. And I spent years wondering if I had misheard it, if it didn't even exist. And I was talking to a Brazilian girl I know who's actually a chemist over in Kansas City now. And I mentioned it to her. And this was like 3 or 4 years back from here. Mm-hmm. And that literally was even out of college at the time, or I was finishing up college. And she goes, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. 5 minutes later, came back and sent me the article on it. I'm not crazy.
Cool.
I'm not crazy. But
it
it's
actually
so hard.
Happened.
Yeah, it's like, I swear. Like, so I had to, like, it's like I sound confident and cocky because I have to. Otherwise, you're going to sit there and go, did I hear that? And you're going to question everything. Do you have that issue?
I think I do have that issue because I tend to be, I don't know if cocky and confident is my baseline. It's not necessarily a comfortable state for me. So I tend to be I question things a lot. And so as a podcast host, that's maybe not the most ideal thing as an attribute, but I try to make it work. And so far it seems to be going okay. It helps to have Phil, who's a lot more communicative, a lot more confident with his just capacity to speak right out. But yeah, I don't know. We make it work.
Yeah. Sometimes you come across as a yes man. Would you agree?
A yes man, huh?
I was wondering if you'd say yes. Know. I was trying to get you to say yes.
I would have to think about that. Oh, he's setting traps for me here. See, I'm too earnest for this kind of thing, Daniel.
But the one thing that I have to say about like Phil's philosophy, and I could have joined a philosophy club. I had people trying to get me the instructor for the political club, the UN club, tried to get me to join because I was the only one in class that like she would ask me. We would literally look at each other, me and the instructor, and wait for the whole class to answer. And if nobody answered, she'd just go, Daniel, and I would have an answer. Like it's just, and so political and philosophy and stuff like that, I can ask questions all day long. But it always feels like philosophy people don't really want to answer the questions. You can break everybody down into one question. What makes them feel self-important? And I'm going to tell you right now, I love that more than I love normal self-importance because at least they're asking a question. But studies show that just talking about stuff often makes people feel like they've done something, so they don't go further. I hate that. Yeah, it's like, no, that's a legitimate study that was done. And it's like, it's the same reason why you don't tell people that they're smart. You never tell anybody that they're smart. Because then it's, you only tell them that they're smart after you've established that you like them for another reason. If you have not done that, do not ever tell anybody that they're intelligent. It's like women, you also don't tell them they're pretty. You establish something else that you actually like. And then you go back and you go, okay, so then they're from that baseline on, they can go, okay, if I look ugly or I feel stupid, this person is still going to respect me because of this thing over here. So they're not afraid to fail. Whereas if you tell them that they're smart, they will not try harder because they can't try harder. Otherwise, they might look stupid and they might not respect them.
Interesting.
It's weird, but yeah. So I was never told I was smart growing up as a kid. So that's why I don't look to people's opinion because it doesn't matter.
That's good. In some ways, that's freedom.
It is. And yet it holds me back because most people aren't going to listen to me. It's weird that way. It's very interesting. And it's something I want to talk about because honestly, I did an episode where, I did that study where I brought people in and I asked them a question, like, tell me a story. Tell me, like, put yourself in your animal's shoes. What's a creative thing that you've done? And I did find a connection. And to me, it sounds like the people that were more imaginative were also more likely to be empathetic. Like they see more of the animals than other people did. But then when you go and look at like somebody like Samson, you don't hear any of that. He doesn't actually care about the animals. It is about him. But yet people are so surface level. See, this is the time that you should be chiming in going, okay, so what you're trying to say is this or this or this. Because it's like, so it's so surface level. Like, oh, well, Daniel, you don't have a great collection. Your enclosures they look like shit. You don't have a massive collection. You haven't been doing this for 20 years. So therefore we shouldn't listen to you. And it's like, yeah, but I'm actually a true empath, which I hate that word because people use it so weirdly bad because they actually don't understand the neurologics of that, of which I do want to get into neuroscience and some, let's talk about that. So like what is a true empath? See, okay. So if you look at it, this goes back to what you say that you are neurodivergent. What does that mean?
Well, the way that I think about it, I'm not sure what it means. I don't know if I can go by the textbook definition, but the way that I think about it is that there are certain baseline expectations for neurological function in people within this society, within this framework, and that the best ways that my brain tends to function tend to fall out of those baseline expectations in a lot of ways. And so I think that said, I think that neurodiversity is very normal, and that a lot of people are neurodiverse or neurodivergent in some way. And so I don't think of it as like abnormal or weird or anything like that. I think of it as like, well, there's certain ways that I struggle to fit into the mold, but that I excel in these other ways. If that makes sense.
Yes, actually, I understand perfectly. I'm literally labeled as autistic. My brother's actually autistic. I have degrees in physics and polymer chemistry focused on medical technology. I have studied nonverbal human communications, actually legitimately studied it. I have actually done studies in other things. I am great at math. Nobody in school ever went. They just labeled me and went, if you need help with something, go down and get help. That's it. Yeah. That is literally it. When it's like, I don't study for math. I never actually, when I went to college, I had to start from pre-algebra all the way to differential equations and calculus 3 and physics 2. And I never actually opened a book, like truly opened a book till college algebra. Wow. My math teacher was my advisor, and she would make fun of me because I'd be in calculus doing this. Yeah. You there? Did you freeze?
Yeah. It froze for just a second. There it goes.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, what? Is this like just
you said doing this, and then it just froze.
I know. It did.
I was like, oh, what is he doing?
Yeah, it's literally just counting on my fingers, and she was making fun of me for it. And it's not bad because I was getting the right answers, but it was interesting. Yeah. And that shows that I'm tactile. Like touch is more something. And I did. In college, I learned that when you want to memorize, study like this. Because it's like a fishing pole. You connect this to whatever you're studying. My vocabulary went from like 7, 8 out of 20, which is normal. That is actually normal memory, to literally 14 to 20 out of 20. Yeah. So I doubled or more my vocabulary that I could remember just by doing this.
It's like for me, I can remember things better if I can fit it into like a story.
Most people actually do that.
Like a frame of some kind. I can remember things better that way. Like if I'm trying to remember memorize a poem or something like that, I have to be able to anticipate what's coming next, and then I can connect it all.
Which actually most people are actually like that. This is why I try to go the story route. But for some reason, I don't think a lot of people want to listen to me tell a story, but yet they actually do better understanding things in a story. This is why stories are actually better in the long run, because it does. The reason why I bring up this brain, I love this. I got this for this exact reason. We talked about this with Bill Stewart. So we both agree that we don't like the use of neurodivergent with autism, even though that's what it's based for. But we don't like that. He didn't know this, and he actually works with autistic people. But truly autistic people, and I don't know if you want to go clinically autistic or actually neurologically autistic, they will have some part of the brain that is enlarged before the age of 2. This is actually very interesting, because what that means is when we look at empathy, and I only know this shit because I've actually watched and listened to neuroscientists, read books, and stuff like that. And it's very interesting when you actually look at brain scans. So we pull out the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the third part of empathy. It's the me versus we. So when your frontal lobe comes in between 22 and 27 years old, yes, there is that big of a disparity in people. It is, I can put myself away from I can put the brakes on it.
Mm-hmm.
I have gone so far that I feel it. When you yawn, I'll yawn. But unless I'm tired, I usually don't yawn. But I'll feel it. Because this part of my brain is so aware of it, I believe, that I actually don't yawn. And it's not because I don't have empathy. What's really cool is when you look at the brain scans of reptiles, they have all the same parts as we do. Mm-hmm. Every bit of our brain they have. It's just mapped differently, completely different mapping. Mm-hmm. But they have all the same parts. It's really fascinating. So this means anything that we have neurologically, that's actually a neurological thing, reptiles can have. Mm-hmm. So therefore, but why do they not have the empathy that we have? Because they do have empathy. They have the modeling part of empathy, and it's in this spot. I don't think they call this the optic tantrum in humans, but that's what they call it in reptiles. But that's what this stuff is inside. It's like a kidney shaped almost. And that's actually the backside of the brain. It's the it's the second hump and the three humps if you ever look at a diagram of a reptile brain, where ours is spherical. So modeling is right here, literally. And so that's when if you yawn, I yawn, it activates that part. So as information goes into your eyes, stops here or around here, dissects information, and then moves to the cerebral cortex, and then moves back down underneath almost to your cerebellum in the optic tantrum, and actually does move to the medulla because that's the information. It's passing this information to that so you can make those decisions. But here's the kicker. If we think about reptiles, and the optic tantrum is actually attached to your medulla. So if we look at a reptile brain, we can actually understand that connects to that. And then that actually, if they're sensing fear, it will kick it to two spots, back to their forebrain or their medulla. What do you think that does?
Trigger some kind of response.
It's a reaction.
Yeah.
That's why their brains need to be linear. Well, ours is spherical.
Right.
So now when we look at our empathy, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, that's back here. And this side of the brain holds your imagination. So this spot right back here is actually the putting, and they do, like if you look at a psychopath's brain, or often autistic people, they will be missing this spot. Completely. They struggle with that. Now, the reason why psychopaths do is because they're actually missing this spot too, really. Like there's something wrong with the connections here if there is any connection.
Empathy connection.
Yeah. And so as we see, our spherical brain makes faster actual connections because of that. And it makes more connections. Whereas a reptile, the white matter here actually goes underneath often to connect them. Doesn't actually go between them. It means it's actually longer than ours should be in retrospect. And nobody really studies the thalamus. I think that's a mistake in reptiles. So this is why I believe autistic people have trouble, because the forebrain is often the part of the brain that is actually overgrown by the age of 2. So there's no connection. This is already tightened up. So therefore it's harder to make these connections. And they can still be made. They're just much harder. So when Bill Stewart does the reptile stuff, they're more likely to focus on those reptiles. So it might be that they might empathize more with those reptiles for 2 ways. One, this whole thing is memory. Your memory retrieval is in the right side of your brain. And so when we look at that, we can say, okay, so the autistic people, they are going to struggle. So they might have a connection over here that comes back here and then goes back down. So it takes longer, but that may go through a memory of reptiles. because they're willing to spend that extra time with them and make those connections, because it's more like that. So when we look at that, neurodivergence is really just nurture. So it's not that you have an overgrown brain or anything, and it could be that you have a piece of it that's overgrown by the age of 2, but it could be. But most of the time, it's just that you grew up differently.
Yeah.
That's literally it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like and so you make different connections. And the more you use those connections, the more myelin gets wrapped around those connections, making them stronger and faster. I can't empathize really without seeing it and hearing it and feeling it, because it all ropes in, going all the way back and forth, because I grew up out in the sticks. My brother's learning disabled, 5 years older, I didn't have the peer review that everybody else had. So my connections are faster because of my myelin is wrapped around this, making this pathway. So when I say that I saw it and felt it, and yet it didn't exist, like it didn't happen. No, I'm serious. I saw it and felt it, like, because that's what my brain does. It's like, I don't have a choice in this. I have no dog. Like, I don't get to go, no, I don't want to feel that. I feel it. That's why it's nice that I've set my brain up that it puts that brake on. Yeah.
So then how does that impact your reptile keeping? I can imagine that makes it complicated, right? Because you have strong feelings about what you're observing with them, right?
Quite the opposite. Because I'm older than 30. My brain's already fully developed. And I already have these abilities before I got reptiles. I got them in 2020, February 6th, maybe in February 3rd, 2021, the day before they were supposed to have the Chiefs play the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Not Patriots, but the Tampa Bay. I don't know why that Super Bowl didn't happen. I'm a Chiefs fan. We got robbed. But like literally, I got my 2 bearded dragons the day before. That's how come I remember it. And ever since then, it's the reason why, even though I've only been keeping for 3 years, I can sit here and actually look at somebody like Intrepid Exotics and go, I love this guy. I love listening to him because he knows his shit, but he got that wrong. And I can be super positive I can be 100% positive. But it's like, I know this and I hear the difference. Like I talked about Samson and stuff, you can hear that difference. Like and so when I look at the reptiles, I know they have the same parts of the brain. And so I do make mistakes. But if I make a mistake, it's usually in the same vein. Like I thought Hydra, she just laid eggs again for the second time in 10 months. And they were beautiful. And she's a rescue, basically. She can't grow fat pads. She's my bearded dragon that loves to swim. So she can't get fat pads at all. Like, I don't care how much I feed them, but I don't overfeed my reptiles. They're actually mentally and physically healthy. And so she would seem like she'd get depressed during the summertime. And I literally called it depression. But it's probably that brumation almost in summer. It's not brumation, but it's that somewhat brumation in summertime. It's probably
estivation.
Estivation. It's probably that. But did I get so far off that I was wrong? No. But you could still say I was wrong. But I wasn't so far off. I can tell it's really fascinating. I preach about reptiles wanting, making it their mental, like I make sure they have windows. I put mirrors up in my room. It's amazing when I tell people that, they go, oh, I didn't think about that. It's like, yeah, because every time I get one out and I show it a window, like it just calms down and just goes, oh, my Savannah monitors do it. Like he's just
interesting,
oh, and especially since they got the Christmas lights next door now. And it's like, so it's that mental stimuli And it's so fascinating. And it's like, that's really cool. So I had just got a water dragon, and he's down here in the basement, and I hate it. I got him in a 2x2x4. So it's a bearded dragon kind of set up about tall. And he's got a 10-gallon water tank in there with a that. And we can get into that later. Remind me if you want to know about my thoughts on the site. Even Lori Trini asked this question. I think I got an answer to it. But everybody complains because I bought him from Snake Discovery as a rescue for like $20. Like you could almost see into his bottom jaw. His face is so red.
Yeah.
Has a super strong bite. Actually, he's focused. He can actually take worms off my hand without biting me. I don't think I've ever actually taken a bite, but you could just feel that strike. And it's like great. And he's not overweight. He doesn't look bad. I got a VizTech light on there. It's very interesting. I see the light is different. Like it does look different. I will say that with VizTech. But he got on my hand the other day, and my first thought was, fuck, I love you, you son of a bitch. It's like, I wish I'd have filmed it. Like, it was just such a wonderful moment. I actually tell people, this goes back to what you guys always ask. Keeping reptiles compared to keeping dogs is like dogs are like my grandmother, loves me no matter what. She was a complete saint. I could do no wrong. Love me no matter what. Reptiles, you earn that shit. It is like my grandfather.
It's
if
true.
you got told
You
I
really have
love
to
you,
earn it.
you earn that shit. And he goes, so that's why it's like almost getting a hug. It's almost akin to getting a hug from an autistic kid. It can leave that. And this is why it's so different going, okay, so your question on what does, it's like, I love bringing up Tarantula Collective on that question because he said on his podcast that he likes older women. It's like, I did a podcast with a breeder of Savannah monitors, the first guy to breed, and a friend of mine that breeds blue tongues. And because I can see massive connections between skinks and monitors. And when we actually look at the brain, you can. You can actually see it. And so it makes sense when you actually look at the brain, you're like, okay, that OL stalk stretches that forebrain.
Yeah.
Whereas snakes, it pushes back that forebrain, and that forebrain starts to separate over the optic tantrum, which happens in mammals, but yet that separation of that forebrain means these two parts of the forebrain don't connect as fast.
Right.
And they may not be connected directly to the optic tantrum like a mammal probably will. So therefore, that connection still had to go underneath and go back around, and that. So now you've just separated stuff. So I thought about it the other day. Do snakes get headaches? Because of that, because it's actually pushing. So it's very interesting. And I made a mistake on that episode with those breeders, and we had to refilm it. But I watched, they were so freaking passionate. So passionate. That it was like, okay, so what do we bring up here that's the same here and there? Because I watched Peyton Manning and Eli Manning and Tom Brady talk on their Monday night podcast thing. And it turns out that their same passion level, the exact same passion level as these breeders for football. What's the connection? Well, you can do multiple things. You can do the exact same thing and get multiple results. That's exciting. So it's like being insane.
It keeps it interesting.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating that you can find that passion in that. And so that's one of those things. It's not a genetic condition unless you want to say that our forebrain genetically wrapped around our optic tantrum, allowing for us to have more connections that allow us the ability to find love in things that we normally animals would not be able to. So making different connections, that's it. That's the only genetic thing that we can say. Everything else is psychological. It's the reason why we can say, okay, so if somebody is like needs that instantaneous love, a dog's probably better than a reptile. but yet
Yeah.
you'll probably get more satisfaction for the short term. Like you'll get more satisfaction out of a reptile in the long term, but yet we know how that works too, is even that. There's a saying that I like that me and my friend always say, and it's, okay, so there was a king that wanted to be happy, and so he got the wisest people in his kingdom to make him a ring. And they said, make me a ring that will always make me happy. And he had them get together, form this ring. They gave him the ring. So now it's okay. And so he read the inscription on the ring because he was just lit up like this, just so happy that they made this ring. And the inside description said, this too shall pass. So it doesn't matter if you're happy, sad, everything should pass. It's very fascinating.
That's like what Rilke said, one of my favorite poets. He said, just keep going. No feeling is final.
Yes.
It's the same thing, you know?
Yeah, it really does.
It's good. It's really important for people to know that, because I think especially if you're in a hard time, it can be easy to feel like this is going to be forever, to feel this way. But that's not the way that feelings work.
It really isn't at all.
Yeah.
And it's super fascinating. And that's really interesting.
Yeah,
is that neurological? Or is it psychology? Is it psychological or neurological? Because I haven't done an episode on it, but I tried to go back and look at this study where they actually truly mapped stuff. And I just, there's so many questions that I have about this French study that it just, I don't know. It's weird, but there's questions. Because we see the 3 humps are really there because of sight. People don't understand that sight takes up so much of your brain power. Like so much of it. But I do believe that, so like my monitors, if I pick them up and hold them to my face, they will still lick me.
Interesting.
Why do you think that is? They know who I am. They're terrified and not. I have a real interesting story about Love, my Savannah. She's sitting on my couch. I literally learned to fold them up in a newspaper because just like skinks, they like to have something touching their back and bottom, their top and bottom. I know I don't always love touching my
like
front.
It's like that. What's called a thigmotaxis, I think is the word for that. When they like that squished feeling, you know, it helps them feel secure. I always think about that with I'm looking at them right now. My knob-scaled lizards, my Xenosaurus, their whole lives are about crevice dwelling. They live in crevices, and so they need that. You know, it's like it's an imperative for them to have that feeling of being that squish.
And I did an episode, and we looked at that, and you kind of find that their medulla actually starts kinking. When you have that much information constantly, it actually, I think what it does is it stretches that medulla, and it has nowhere to stretch because it has so much information coming in, and so it kinks. Yeah. I know, like I look excited because
like
I love it. I'm like,
it's like a tactile overwhelm almost.
That's what I think it is. Don't quote. Yes, quote me. Quote me. Okay. But it's not. Okay. It's not studied. That French study found there's 5 things that are like that, and they only mathematically are the cerebellum is the only thing that really mathematically suits this, and that's limbless, reduced limb, quadrupleats that are arboreal, quadrupleats that are tutorial, and quadrupleats that are multiple. And they all have different types of cerebellums. Snake cerebellums, you have the optic tantrum, the cerebellums actually fall back. And they're very thin. Whereas almost every quadrupleat will climb over the cerebellum or the optic tantrum, and they will actually be thicker.
Interesting.
But I don't like the way they mapped this stuff as well, because we actually find that blind species are almost like just this the leatherback sea turtle, the diagrams, it has the biggest range of any reptile in the world.
Yeah.
Brain really isn't that much bigger than any other sea turtle. Yet its head's massive, its eyes are smaller. And if you think about it, all of the other sea turtles basically live in the shallows.
Mm-hmm.
So they have all this stuff to map because people don't understand reptiles map their territory. Mm-hmm. So they have all this stuff to map that they can see. Sea turtle, the leatherback, gets on the currents and rides through the currents to have the biggest territory. So you know what it does?
So amazing.
Their brain looks like a pile of shit with a little dingly hanging out instead of the 3 humps.
Uh-huh.
Because its eyes are even smaller. So basically, it's almost blind.
Interesting.
Because it lives out in the deep, dark ocean.
Yeah.
So
eating jellyfish.
Yeah. Everything else, all your other sensories take up so little effort. They call the wobble in the ball, the spider ball, they call a neurological issue. But it's in the ear. It's in the ear bone.
So it's like an equilibrium issue.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It is still psychological. It is still neurological, but it's not actually directly in the brain.
Right.
Very fascinating. But also the optic tantrum also deals with sound. So it could actually be interrupting that optic tantrum as well, because that is also where sound is dissected. The OL stock, the front stuff, I saw Tyrannosaurus Rex brain, like not a brain, but they show the skull, and they were talking. You really got to stop me here. You got to like chip in here because I'm getting excited. I'm like, dude, I haven't talked to anybody in so long in a few days.
Well, the problem is that I'm interested in what you're saying. So
I know, right?
I'm curious about where you're going to go next.
So the Tyrannosaurus Rex, they were showing the skull, and their eyes are basically just as big as our eyes. Because they don't need any more information coming in than we do. So where you would think their eyes are like this, but no, they're like this.
Right.
So really tiny in that skull, and that skull needs to be so big because they need to be able to take damage from their actual jaw clamping. But think about it for a second. We know all vertebrates have the same parts to the brain. And when we look at the OL stalk, the olfactory stalk in the nose, ours is actually underneath our forebrain here. So it's actually tucked, like it's actually back in here. It's actually nowhere out here. Whereas a snake or any lizard is out here in the front. And like I said, the snakes pushes it back while the skinks and probably monitors, but we don't have enough. Like they haven't done enough like studies on monitors, but I could make claims because I've kind of understood this, and you could really see it with the behaviors, but that stretches that forebrain on that skinks because it's so much bigger than a regular lizard. So think about the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It probably actually did have a reptile type brain, but you could also say a bird brain because they're exactly the same mapping. So that OL stalk was probably massive on a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Because just think about those eyes back here. So if this is a massive Tyrannosaurus Rex skull and their eyes are all the way back here,
it's a lot.
What we know about, so we know about the brains of reptiles often. They're even snakes. Their brains don't usually come over past the eyes, except the OL stalk. Everything else lies pretty much behind the eyes. Their actually optic nerve is underneath the brain, not in the eye sockets. It's the reason why they probably can see this. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So think about that as a T-Rex. And so going back to my monitors, I've kind of come to the conclusion, and I am going to give a talk at the St. Louis Herp Society on this upcoming deal, because I did. It's like, so that OL stalk goes connectly to the forebrain, and so it's like they're reinforcing what they see because they know what I look like. So when they're afraid, it goes straight to that optic tantrum, so you don't see that tongue come out because they know to be afraid, and so they don't do that. So therefore, that tongue coming out is almost a reinforcement. I would love to make a like video equipment thing where you can get it on your phone where you could kind of see, because what I'm thinking, I don't know if the heat pits go to the OL stock or not, but they should, because that's the thing I teach about that. The reason why I always go back to that blind sight and how because the way biology is taught is basically magic. So your information from your eyes go back to your cerebral cortex. That would be magic. Wow. Yeah, it's like that's magical. We don't know. It actually travels through the center of the brain. That's why there's a little small delay. And that's why you should see a delay in reptiles if it's something they're not used to. It's the reason I even did a video where I showed it. Like that black bearding does not happen instantaneous. So you almost have to stop looking at these animals as, oh, what is this thing afraid of? What's this thing mad about? It's what happened, not what's happening. It's really fascinating. But if it is about what's happening, they're either terrified for their lives, they're trained whether you did it or they did it. That's it. It's the only two reasons. They've got more connections there because they built those connections through training. Whether they did it or you helped them along. Or they're afraid for their lives. Because even a food response is usually not that instantaneous. It's like the forebrain really has to That's why monitors and skinks are probably so curious over other reptiles, because they've stretched that forebrain and that actual... See, so if we look at it, there's about 5 to 8 types of reptile brain. Bearded dragon, iguana type brains. You might, where the question is here, geckos and chameleons. Chameleons have a smaller version of that. That's what's going on in chameleon brain. It's almost the exact same brain as a bearded dragon, but much, much smaller. And then you have the gecko brain, which, they're smaller, but I hate that question. The intelligent question. Yeah. How do you look at that question?
It's so hard because it's like the classic, thing about it. It's like if you compare a fish about its capacity to do this or that, it's like it doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's not what a fish is supposed to do. There's a girl. I think of it the same thing with reptiles. It's like, well, it's really hard to. They're really intelligent at being reptiles. They're really good at being reptiles, but far better than we would be.
So when you look at skinks, that's one of those brains that's one of the 5 to 8 brains is a skink brain. So I've said it stretches that forebrain. That forebrain, your imagination, your memory retrieval, your memory, all that's in that forebrain. So it's really fascinating when you think about skinks. So most people would go, well, that means because it has those longer connections that are in the forebrain, not just connecting it to the optic tantrum, but that means that this thing is going to make those connections between that, and it can be more creative. Because creativity, talk about it, the right brain controls the right side of your body, left side controls the right side of your brain, blah, 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 kind of thing. Everything's crisscross invertebrates. Invertebrates is a completely different thing, and I have just started diving into that. I've got Dr. Crawfish coming on, and there was a study on crawfish. There was a study on, I love crawfish. They're actually super intelligent for what they actually are. Mine would actually come out at me when they wanted food. When they were hungry, I knew because they would actually come out at me. It's like, I pick up on little things like that. So it's really fascinating. So what's a problem for a skink? Because most people would go, well, skinks, they're not that intelligent, blah, 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 not really that smart. But it's like, but they are smarter than a beardy. They're more curious than a beardy. And because they don't have the same problems that beardies have, but yet they do.
Right.
Me and the guy, when we did the fire skink episode, we talked about the fact that I've seen multiple types of skinks use their enclosure to break open bugs.
Like smash it against the enclosure? Yeah, interesting.
Fire skinks, emerald green tree skinks. It's like, no, that's actually a very intelligent way of doing it. Where most of the other stuff isn't that small, and they just do the bulldog. I know. They're like,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So I saw a fish with that same type of jaw. And my first thought is, does this thing tear like a freaking skink? Like a fish. I'm like, dude, that's so cool to start thinking about that. I have one type of anole. Oh, God. The monkey anal. Yeah. Yeah, that was funny as hell. For the audience, on my Instagram, I have a live video where I was talking to a friend of mine. And I was, it's something like, because it was when you guys first started your deal, you were talking about monkey lizards. It's like, what the hell is a monkey lizard? And comes up a Star Wars character when you look it up.
Yeah.
Are you keeping Star Wars characters? Can you explain?
I mean, maybe. I call them monkey lizards because that is one of the names that's used for them. But of course, it's a common name. So there's a whole bunch of different common names. The more common one in herpetoculture is monkey anole, but they're not anoles. They're not actually related to anoles.
Huh.
They're in their own family. They just look like anoles. But they're off on their own. They're in their own clade and everything. And
that's so interesting.
Really weird. Yeah.
I've got a gentleman coming on, Jonathan Loso.
Yeah. He's a legend in the anole world.
I know, right? Like, it's like, dude, I'm like, dude, this guy literally did everything that you're not supposed to do and has become famous for it. It's insane.
Yeah, he's really cool. Really amazing researcher. Yeah.
And it's like, but it's very fascinating because I was having my buddy look up the monkey lizard. So we look up monkey anole and he misspelled anole. And all of a sudden we get this giant ass that looks like a flower and he did it on the work computer. So he looked it up with the E off of the end. So it's even though it's A, he spelled it E-N-O-L. And I said, no, take off the E. It's an A. And so he put A-N-O-L and it brought up monkey anal. And so there's this red giant baboon ass in our face. Oh, no. And we kind of go, no, put an E on that. And he puts the E on there and it comes up the monkey anole. And it's like, okay, that's really cool. Did we really see what we saw? And it's like,
did we just see what we just saw?
Like, he's like, because we just kind of like diced past it. And oh my God, we still laugh about it. Like, it was like, dude, are you serious? He said, he told me that I tricked him. I'm like, dude, no, I really didn't.
It was not purposeful.
It was not. You have nightmares about that, but oh my God, it was hilarious. Just couldn't make that shit up. And yeah, so even though he just left for another job, it's like we made the joke that his boss from that job is going to get an email. Why did your employee look up monkey anal?
Oh no. It's the worst thing.
And it was like a Christmas week, so there was nobody else in the office, so it would be super easy to see that.
We all know who looked that up.
Yeah, it's like, not me. I didn't know it was Jack. It was Jack. Jack did it. Oh, everybody in the office would go, yeah, he was hanging out with Daniel. The guard shack even knows me as the lizard.
Daniel the lizard.
I did.
Nickname, actually.
Give me just a second. You want to talk about the on your website? You only have 3 species.
Yeah, that's true.
I can't believe I can actually say that word, Spilote.
You nailed it. Spilote.
I know, it's crazy, dude. I got stuck with Losos. I was messing that up. It's like, yeah. And then you have tricolored hognose.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you have the monkey anals.
Yep.
What else?
But I actually have a lot more. Yeah. So I also have Texas alligator lizards. I have
I saw those
knob-scaled lizards. They're really cool. The Texas alligator lizards.
They're are they a skink?
No, they're not. They're in the anguid family.
I wonder if the brain would be like a skink brain.
I think it would. I think it would. Honestly, they remind me a lot of monitors in the way that they behave, like dwarf monitors.
Monitors.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying.
Have that,
You would probably love the Texas alligator lizards, Daniel. They're really, really cool.
I almost bought them because they were captive. They were captive bred.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, so you can have all 3 for $250.
Wow, that's a really good price.
It's like, yeah, but I didn't really want to spend $250. I really had 5 animals on my list. Yeah. And I ended up with some fire skinks. I didn't actually want.
Those are awesome.
I know they are. I love them.
Yeah.
But I love my Peter Bandit skinks. I've actually got them. I'm trying to roommate them right now. So next year, I've seen them bite. So we're gonna get eggs, and I'm gonna do some weird shit with them because all the Peter Bandit skinks are captive or wild caught.
Yeah.
So I have noticed that diseases are easier to kill, like God, what is it? God, I can't find that now. I've got a toy that I actually it's the Spider-Man lizard. And it actually has the lab coat on in the lizard. I'm like, it's a toy of me.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But no, my
perfect.
I know, right? I can't find it right this second. Is it on the other side? Probably, but I can't find it. But no, my plan is to separate a couple of sets of them if I can.
Mm-hmm.
Because the younger ones seem to die quicker from infections, like upper respiratory infections, than the older ones do. The other ones, I've seen them go months. Where it's like, dude,
interesting.
You're still going, you're still kicking, because they probably went through it. So they
have some sort of antibodies. Immunity to it. Yeah.
Whereas the younger ones don't. And so when you're dealing with them and you put them back with captive or wild caught ones and they're younger, they could come down with those diseases. It's the reason why, going back to what Phil always talks about with the the enclosure looks. Yeah. Oh, dude, I want to apologize, but I am still furious with you guys. But I got it wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong. But it's one of those things, like I said, if I feel it, I don't get mad easily. So when I do get mad, I don't get over it. Because you earned that mad. If you push me to that limit, like, you deserve whatever you get. Because, so it's very, but you guys, because Phil and the importer was talking about not doing the equilibrium, the acclimation.
Quarantine.
No,
maybe?
They said acclimation or whatever that is. Where they
acclimation.
Yeah, but I thought you were, because it did sound like quarantine, that he was saying not to quarantine. You didn't have to.
Yeah.
I'm still livid. But it sounds like that. I know that's not what you meant. So I got it wrong. Yeah. But I'm still furious. Furious. Because you guys had a voice more than mine. I literally made videos on quarantining. And
super important.
I say it. I'm one of the few people who actually have quarantine videos. Freaking, I actually said it in the video. It's in the title. It's in the freaking thumbnail. And I still have people going, well, you're keeping those animals wrong. You're keeping those animals wrong.
When they're in quarantine.
No, you don't add substrate to quarantine, because then the diseases get into the substrate and then they could reinfect themselves. I always look at, and so how do you get things there to get them to act in a natural way without the substrate?
It's a good question.
When I do arboreal species, I put a styrofoam head in the enclosure. $5 freaking any store. $5. Never have I ever had an arboreal species not use it. they're fine with it. They don't care.
Yeah.
It means nothing.
Yeah.
To them. It's can they get climb?
They're just going to climb. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Emerald skinks, freaking Cuban nidinoles. It doesn't matter. It's put newspaper down. And I will admit, newspapers soak up water, so it's a little hard to keep them. But that's why you work with them. And you want, so when you look at quarantine, you have 3 goals. Find out what's wrong with the animal. Make that animal better. And then actually make sure anything that's wrong with that animal doesn't move to your collection.
Exactly. Yep.
That's the 3 goals. As long as you're focused on those 3, you can't go wrong. So watching for their natural behavior is the exact best thing to do. Skinks, if they don't bury themselves and they're a burial species, it means that they are sick or dying. That's not a joke either. Like that's boom. I've seen it over and over again. Yeah, that's it. I've got a blind one. He spends all day out in the sun. It's weird, but he's blind. So I'm figuring that he's sick. But yet when the ones are ready to die, they stay all out there. And I wonder if that goes back to, there is a neurological thing in humans that we know of. The ego, an ego death. When people die and they're in like that there's certain parts of the brain. So the hospital brought them back to life within minutes. There's parts of their brain that actually have just smoothed over almost to where they've lose that ego completely. And so the world just changes. You actually find in truly open-minded people, you will see this too. They don't take everything as a personal assault. It's very interesting. And that shows, that actually shows a more open-minded person and somebody that has less of this. And that could be where the survival thing comes in, because they want that, because it is a neurological thing and not a psychological thing. It's weird. So reptiles could have this. So therefore, I'm wondering if the skinks are actually losing that.
Interesting. Yeah.
As they die, it's just smoothing over and they're kind of going, okay, I don't really care anymore. I'm fine with this. It's very fascinating. It's a theory. It's not proven or anything. I haven't even gone into it because it's such a, there's no way. So when I talk about the brain, there's a lot of people who are probably going, oh, well, this is really advanced stuff. Not really. When you get into the forebrain, like that's what these marks are. They're showing you different things that different parts of the forebrain does. We can't do that with reptiles. We do not have the technology to actually ask them questions while we have them in an MRI or a brain scan of any kind to figure this out. So we can only see the generalization. And so we know this happens in humans in this part of the brain. So that means it's in the same part of the brain as the reptile. But does it connect the same? It actually goes back to why I explained that reptiles are almost autistic, like the autistic of the community. Oh, I just watched Double Toasted. The podcast thing was talking about the new show Reacher. This goes back to us thinking differently than what we had previously. And it's very, very fascinating that I really should let you talk more.
No, you're doing great.
I know, but I could do this anyway. I don't have the great Roy on that often, but they were, and yeah, you are great. Trust me. They were talking about the new Reacher on Amazon Prime episodes and stuff, and they were talking about this gigantic guy like he is in the comic books. Like the people on the show called him a kaiju. You've guns. We have a kaiju. You know, he's 6'5", 300 pounds, just pure muscle. And it's like, he's massive. But what I loved about what Double Toasted did was talk about it as autistic. He just walks around staring at people. But yet he's intelligent. Most people automatically want to go, no, autistic people are stupid. It's your first, like, almost instinct. And it's like, no. If you think about what I said earlier,
like, pathologize it.
Yeah, it's just quicker to do that. We want to simplify everything.
Yeah.
But when you think about what I said earlier, it just means and most likely it's the forebrain, and it could be parts of the forebrain have just been enlarged, so they didn't make the connections that normal people did. It's
just different.
Because it was already. What's the point of the creases in the brain? So when we talk about smooth brain of reptiles, I don't even know if that's accurate, but we can still use it for now. I got to look into that more. But
it's the increased surface area, right?
Yes, just like I talked about with the mandula.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the increased surface area as we learn, so we can learn new things. So reptiles have a smooth brain, so it's harder to learn new things. Well, why would they not want to be able to have more connections to learn new things? Why do you think that is?
I honestly don't know.
Think about the cheetah and how the cheetah has to be taught how to hunt, yet the sea turtle automatically knows where to go out of the egg.
So they can move more instinctually.
Yeah, and I've started to hate that word instinct because it takes away from...
It's loaded. It's loaded. It takes away from the intelligence in a way.
But that's the way I talk about the brain too, is I load it. Because there's no way for us to truly know. I actually found in that information the optic tantrum of because they didn't make a 4D model of this brain, but they have it in the study of a tokay gecko. There's one spot of a tokay gecko where a gay gecko, a bearded dragon, day geckos like 80-some thousand. Bearded dragons early 90,000. Day geckos, in the brain for this part of the brain. And I don't really know what that means exactly. That's part of the problem. But all of a sudden, the tokay is almost the exact same as the day gecko until one spot in the optic tantrum where it's 4,000. What does that mean? That means the optic tantrum is not exactly the same. It's not the same shape. So it means some part of that optic tantrum has shrunk, but it doesn't mean that it's that exact same spot in the brain as ours. It could mean that they should have that exact same spot in that optic tantrum being the exact same stuff we have. What's really fascinating is I've seen something once that said, see, this is logic thinking, people. So audience, this is how we logically conclude things, where they showed the optic tantrum of a reptile and said their cerebral cortex is in the optic tantrum. Well, what does that mean if that's true, since we all all vertebrates started the same? That means our forebrain wrapped around our optic tantrum. That means that optic tantrum, that cerebral cortex, if it was in the optic tantrum, had to actually completely move parts. The odds of that, not likely. So that means that diagram is wrong. But if it's right, oh my God, that opens up so much more. Like that's just like there's so many more questions that leads to. But honestly, not likely. And so what we could conclude with this is that some part of that optic tantrum in a tokay gecko, because it could have the exact same great eyes as any other reptile has. But if it's not dissecting the information as well, because the optic tantrum is not the same, then this would explain why it's so defensive to movement.
Would it also have something to do with because a day gecko is a diurnal species, right?
Yes.
Whereas
actually,
the tokay is nocturnal, right?
You're right. So this also goes back to what I talked about with the sea turtles.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. But that also means, but yet his eyes may not be that far apart. Right. If you actually cut open the eyes. It's really fascinating when you think about it. So they cut open the eyes, they measure the lumps to measure how it sees. But yet that information still gets dissected in the optic tantrum.
Totally.
So if that optic tantrum is off differently, because we see in snakes, it almost feels like the optic tantrum's smaller. But it's very fascinating. So that may be like, they may not, even though they're snakes, the eyes may be great, they may not. It's very fascinating. So another thing is with the Knowles, I said this to Bill Strand, and he gave me a weird look when we were talking about a Knowles and because it's like I've seen my bearded dragons and my anoles, any species of anoles, run into the glass, try to get out of the glass because they don't know the glass is there. They don't understand how to see it.
It's confusing. Yeah.
But I've also seen my anoles jump on the glass as if they knew it was there.
Right.
Why? Why do you think that is?
Does it have something to do with them acting from like a instinctive reactive state versus
I don't know. Like it may be.
State?
It may be.
I don't know.
Well, you think about how geckos and anoles use their fingers.
Yeah.
So they're molecularly bonding to things. Do you think that information doesn't go back to the brain?
No, I think it probably does.
So they don't see glass, but they feel glass. They know glass is there. Right. So I've seen them walk up to it and jump on it because they know it's there because they have felt it.
Interesting.
It's really fascinating. Even I hear Ryan McVeigh talk about it all the time that these animals see different colors, but it's like I've seen my beardies actually walk under the UVA. Yeah, they see it, but they'll like if I put a new one in, they'll stop. Like all of a sudden they'll just be walking under my UVA in the cold side in the garden area, and they'll actually stop and then go. It's a physical response.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. So they'll know that light is probably different than the UVB, but they have to feel it first.
Right. Right.
So it's like, so they can note and they can see that because they do map their territory. Very interesting how this works. It's very cool when you stop looking at these animals as just mindless and start going, no, we know they map their territory. It's Emerald,
I don't think they're mindless at all.
No, what is his name? Imperial Exotics was talking about his Burmese python. It was constantly moving, but it wasn't scared moving. And he was like, this thing's very curious. It's like, no, it's not. Nope, you're completely wrong on that one. They'll snakes like that will constantly move till they find somewhere comfortable in the wild. So that's what that is. It's uncomfortable. When you break down nonverbals to comfort, discomfort, confidence, and insecurities, you'll almost always get it right.
Interesting.
Almost always. When you break it down like that, it just changes every way you look at it. So he knew that snake. Right. What I loved is that he talked about that snake as being annoyed. Have you ever seen your animals? Do you have any stories about your animals that you think were annoyed with you and what body language they showed?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes my snakes, if they're annoyed, if I try to touch them, they'll jerk to.
Oh my God!
To get me to say no.
Yes. It's such a universal.
That seems like unannoyed behavior.
I don't think enough people see this. It's like that weird.
Yeah.
Like you put a leaf up to pitch the pitch.
Yeah.
My beardy.
Yeah.
It's like
shakes it
I
off.
did it to my I
Can
put
you hear
a
that?
berry. Huh?
Can you hear that? You can't hear it.
No.
My wolf dog is howling right now. Sorry.
Oh, cool. I love dogs. I don't have dogs or cats because the lights and stuff in that place. I don't want them to knock it off. That's the reason why I don't have undertank heating either. But I seen that exact same behavior out of my water dragon when I try to feed it a berry. And it's so interesting. It is.
No.
Yeah, just no, I don't like that. Yeah. But pitch, what do you like? I'm so not impressed with enclosure size, enclosure looks, how the animal like how many animals you have. I'm so not impressed with any of that crap. You got all these super special reptiles. I don't give a shit. That means nothing. Anybody can go out and spend money to make that look like that. Do you even do people even understand what they're actually doing? Because I do. I can tell you every single inch and every single thing of my animals. I can tell you what I've done wrong, what I'm doing wrong right now. And I can tell you what. My Savannah monitor's enclosure looks like shit because I have 2 of them in it. One's male and we believe one's female. I do not want her laying eggs. She has a bad arm. She looked bad when I bought her, and so did the other one. And so if I allow them to get substrate, because I know to do it deep, they could brumate, lay eggs, and shorten their lifespan. When right now they're not unhealthy, they climb, so they are still getting that exercise, just not as well as they would if I gave them more substrate. So I recognize that. And like Peter Bandit skinks, feeling a healthy adult male Peter Bandit skink is like holding a fish. If you hold one and you grab it and it starts moving and it does not like this.
Yeah. Good luck holding on to it.
Yeah, it's like it may not be an adult, and the weaker it feels, it is legitimately weaker from being sick. So do you have so when pitch, so what do you think it means when a bearded dragon gets dark right here? The only person that I've ever gotten to give me a clear answer that was actually right was Emily from Snake Discovery.
Interesting.
That's why she impressed me. What do you think it means when they get dark right here? Not under the beard. Just
I don't know.
They're annoyed. They're a little sickly, or they're a little upset.
Agitation.
Pitch the bitch gets this chin strap, a complete chin strap. It's not a full beard, just a chin strap. It's like, and she's pissed about everything. She's annoyed from it. She's actually super intelligent. She's like a dog. When I walk in the room, not even a joke. Like everybody's like, my bearded dragon just sits there and side eyes me. Oh, don't you love that? The side eye talk. It's like, no, that animal doesn't care about you that much. Come on. Yeah. No. But Pitch literally runs at me and like goes, like trying to look at my hands. Did he bring something?
What you got?
What you got? But she's so smart. Like I have a window on this side where she can see out. And then you have to go to the other side to actually pull her out. And she gets fed on that other side. She will see me on this side. Sometimes she'll come over here if I rub my fingers and she'll try to get at my fingers. But most of the time, she stays on that other side and like side eyes me and like looks at the back at the door. She's done that since childhood, where she will literally look at me and like look down in her bowl. It's like, when I took them to the park, when I was taking them to the park, we drove by the stoplight to go to the lake. So you can't see the lake.
Yeah.
And we drove by because I was going to go get tires, and then I was going to take them to the lake afterwards. And so she went.
She looked at the turn.
Yeah, she literally like, what's happening? She's one of 2 reptiles that will actually try to push the lid off of the tub. It's like, I don't have snakes, so that's a test that I would like to do with ball pythons and boas is to actually take an enclosure, let them figure out how to open the doors and escape, see if the python does it faster, the ball, because of that tactileness, because of that, do they have better tactile senses than other snakes because of that? And so if they can, and then you actually move the enclosure and see if they'll do it the same way, see if they have to find it, see their behavior in it, and then take a completely acrylic tank, same size, and do the same with it. Maybe even put like a small etching of an X in it and see if they can tell and see if they can still get out with like that. So it would it would show you that it's actually a tactile senses instead of their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do that study. That's a cool study to me. I'm not a snake guy.
Cool
that would be really interesting. So when we talk about them being annoyed, what are some of the things that you've seen that you don't think that other people might have seen? Just in general.
I mean, like I said, that whole like jerking thing with the snakes, they'll like jerk to get things off of them. Like if one of the other snakes is moving across their body and they don't want it, they'll kind of shove with their coils. That's one. I mean, with the puffing snakes, when they're annoyed, they'll puff. They'll inflate their throats and they'll kind of move
pretty
away.
Clear sign. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty clear. Like, hey, leave me alone, and, but I think that with also, I mean, it depends on the species. Like with the hog noses, if they don't want to be touched, they do these really erratic, fast movements. And, of course they'll try and burrow and get away. The Xenosaurus, they'll dive into their crevices.
So what are some other things like diseases and stuff that you've seen where people should probably go, no, I can't do that. If I see this, I should automatically take it to the vet. When I see the Peter Bandit skinks, if you see pink underneath, it's a skin infection, and it has to have a actual antibiotic that can only be given by a vet. Well, you can give it, but you can only get it from a vet.
I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing is I haven't had to take a lot of my animals to the vet for issues recently. Like most of them have been really good. I did have an issue with my monkey lizards, the Polycris, with overfeeding the female while she was gravid. I fed her too much and she produced a ton of eggs, like 12 eggs, which is a lot for a lizard that small. She was a really small lizard. And she ultimately died because she couldn't pass all these eggs. She became exhausted. She passed like half of them. And then I took her in, they did do surgery and they removed the other 6 eggs, but she was too weak at that point to recover from the surgery. And so with the other females I had when they were gravid, I didn't feed them nearly as much. I fed them far less often during their gravid period, and they produced smaller clutches, but they passed them fine. No issues at all. So that's one I would say is like, be mindful of like, I think it's like people are often very worried about like not feeding their animals enough, but I think it's actually far less common that you're underfeeding your animal than that you're overfeeding it. And, particularly with stuff like that, that's like very slightly built. Like these are these long, slender arboreal lizards. It's hard to tell if they're overweight because they don't ever really look overweight. They're so slender, but, like anything you can overfeed them and ultimately can have a bad impact on their health. So that's one thing I would say. I mean, other than that, honestly, I haven't had any like recurring themes or issues in terms of like health issues here with my animals, thankfully, but feeding is a big, if that makes sense.
Yes, I was actually looking up something.
Yeah. Go for it.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I can.
See, that's Hydra. Like she's the one that doesn't have any fat pads. She was 300 grams after this. Those eggs look fantastic. She was not with a male.
Yeah, they look good.
She's only 300 grams afterwards. Females in the wild are about 325. She looks fantastic for that. Like that was after that. Like I made sure to feed her more. So
looks healthy to me.
Yeah, she literally laid those that day sometime within 12 to 14 hours, somewhere between 14 to, like 2 hours before this picture was taken. Yeah, I don't breed beardies. This is just her naturally doing this within 10 months of the last time she did this. This is the only reason why I know she's a female is because she laid eggs. Like this is
right.
Because she's the one that actually had questionable sexing. And that's probably due to that. See, that's the thing. Oh my God, God. What? I'm trying to think how to say this nicely, because I've had a lot of issues with people online and stuff. And it's like I was called sexist because I dare question the vent method. I didn't even know this person was a female because I didn't care. And I showed pictures of it. But there's not a lot of studies in the in-betweens. Like, it's very interesting. A buddy of mine was talking about his ball python. And it's like, okay, so males have this long a tail and females have this long a tail. And it's like, but his was in between. They don't really study the in-betweeners. So it's like, it was really hard to tell. It's like, no, it's definitely this. If it's this. In skinks, the head-to-hip ratio seems to always be off. But when it comes to, like, emerald skinks, you can tell by the foot pads, so you don't actually have to go off that because they're so small and flighty. And then when you talk about zebra skinks, you don't really have to go off that because they're clear color distortion. Peter Banded skinks, you get about 1.25 difference with males. You get a 1 with females. Like, it's their head to hip ratio is almost spot on, whereas the males get close to 1.5. Broken, my Peter Banded skink, that is a see. This is why I respect you, because you actually have these answers. Because not everybody has these answers, you know. And it's like, okay, for your stuff, not mine. But Broken, when I first got him, he had a 1.16. And then he went to a 1.18. That's the reason why I think he's male. But his vent looks female. And he has the shorter tail. But his head-to-hip ratio is completely bigger than a female's usually is. Nobody ever studies this stuff. Like the in-betweeners. Hydra had a butt crack. But, you know, she also had the bigger spikes, bigger than a female usually has. Like, there was a lot, has the bigger nose than Pitch does. So it's like, it's really interesting. And that probably goes back to that metabolic, like when I first got her, a girl had her in a 10-gallon tank.
Yeah, and totally.
She was 4 months old, approximately. Yeah. And she
that's what I was just thinking.
Couldn't lift
like
herself
with these
off
secondary sex characteristics, how much of it is like nurture? You know, it's influenced by nurture for sure.
She literally couldn't lift herself off. Took me 2 weeks. Oh, I actually have a video of it. I'm crying. Like, you can hear me cry. Because to see her jump around the enclosure. And that was back in like June or July of 2021. So, yeah, it's been wonderful to have her here. She's full grown, laying eggs. But she was a metabolic bone disease. But she was calcium deficient. Just
undernourished. Yeah.
Every time I've ever heard somebody talk about their bearded dragon as changing genders, because that actually, I've heard a couple people say it. They always have lip issues except for one. And that lip issue, a vet told me that it was a calcium deficiency. And that's like, that makes perfect sense now, that calcium deficiency. And then there might be that if they get it in an early age. The only one, I didn't get to see the face of this red dragon, but it was missing a leg. And that was bitten off when it was very, very young. So therefore, is it trauma in early adolescence that might cause that? It's interesting.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I really don't know, because nobody studies this. Nobody studies the in-between.
I mean, that's part of what's so cool about it, though, is that there's so much that we don't know, you know, and that maybe there's a lot to learn, you know, there's a lot left to learn. I think that's part of the thing that's exciting about herpetoculture and, you know, working with these animals that aren't so well known and understood, is that we get to have new insights, you know, and stuff like that, and new questions.
Well, the fact that bearded dragons have been around this long, and yet I can still ask people that are 20-year keepers, what does this mean? And they don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's a shit ton.
Yeah.
And it's like, but I've only been here since 2021 and this is 2023. Like, it's like, yeah, no, don't listen to me. I don't know shit.
Well, you have different lenses, you know, you have a different perspective. And so you're asking different questions, and that's valuable.
Exactly.
You know,
there's a girl at work. Oh my God. She pisses me off, but I don't think she's a bad person. She's very down to earth, but she's been there for years, longer than me, working with these equipment. And I'm like, can you teach me how to work this equipment? I don't know how to work that. But she actually just got done using that equipment, that rheometer. And it's like, but she doesn't know how to use it. She doesn't. And literally, like a month later, I'm like, okay, come here. I want to show you this. If you see this, this is the problem with this. Within a month, I freaking had it down. And it's like, it's so annoying. And you just want to like, God, you're an idiot. But it's like, I just got done thinking to myself, I need to stop that because I hate, because like I can't spell for shit. I can't freaking grammar for crap. I literally thesis statement in my English class. I'm like, this is what a thesis statement is. Teacher's like, no. He goes, that is what it is. I'm like, that's what I wrote down. She's like, no, that is not what you wrote down. Like, your thesis statement is not correct. It's like, but that's what it. But that's it. Like, my brain just goes, whoa, and it's weird. So it's like I try to go, okay, stop.
You have these other gifts.
Yeah, it's like, let's stop. Let's think about this for a moment. If I change it from, man, you are stupid, to what motivates you? I asked her. She really didn't have an answer to what motivates her, which is an answer in itself. It's very interesting when you look at that. So it's like, because she has a master's in biology, but biology is the philosophy of science. So I make fun of biologists all the time at work. No, I'm a real scientist. I don't name shit for a living.
You're working with chemicals and compounds.
Math. I'm a math guy.
More elementary things.
Yeah. It's like, ask me how it works. Don't ask me what it's called. There's no way I'm going to get that right. Like, there's no way. Yeah. But if you ask me how it works, I can go into details that you didn't even know were even real yet. But it's interesting because it's like, but I also know this. He had a master's in biochemistry, and he took the scale and dunked it in water to clean it. So that messed up the whole scale. And he had a master's in biochemistry. So it's master's doesn't really mean much, but it's like she has a master's, so it's like maybe she's not as dumb, but she's just not smart in the way that I'm wanting, like the thinking. It's interesting.
Just a different realm.
It is. And so it's like, what's the problem? It is very interesting. Do those monkey lizards, when they're not in Jabba's palace, do they actually stick to the sides of stuff?
They, not to like glass, but they can. So they have like this, fake rock background in their viv, and they can climb that, but they're very chameleon-like. So they like to climb and grasp branches, and they do the whole overhand movement thing like chameleons do. And honestly, I think of the monkey lizards as kind of the Western Hemisphere convergent evolution answer to chameleons. They're very similar in terms of in terms of the niche they occupy in nature. They're both passive strategists for their food. So they're sit and wait predators. They're pretty slow moving, but they're capable of short bursts of speed if they need to catch food or escape a predator. Oh my God. And they have the independently moving eyes, so they can have one eye on you and one eye over here,
that's cool. What makes it so hard to tell if they're using their imagination or memory, is that their eyes are still like that 260.
Yeah.
You really have to know your animal. When I take Pitch out, I know that she does not care about humans. She's so indifferent to us. We're just annoying in her way. That is literally her thinking. Like you're just here. I want to see that big fish at Bass Pro. She loves those big fish. And it's so interesting. You have to almost understand their personality. Because I've seen calm fancy. Because it's like, I always questioned it. Does it still apply to them? Because it should. And when I drop a phone on the couch, calm fancy, my big beardy goes, every time. It doesn't matter where he's facing. If I throw it on the couch, he looks with that left eye down. He's using his imagination. And so it's really interesting to see that. But the other day, I saw him do this. And there was nothing. It's like he was looking down beyond the couch, like in the back of the couch. So it's like, was he looking at the light or something on the floor? Because I don't know which one's dominant right now in his eyes. I don't understand. Yeah. And it's like, but it's really fascinating.
That's
what
cool.
What are some of the things that you see that like just things like that are just things people don't?
Gosh, I mean, there's so much that I'm so curious about with reptiles. You know, it's like, I mean, one thing I think about a lot is like, what is the like interior life of a species, like a fossorial species, something that like lives underground, you know, that like spends most of its time like buried in substrate, you know, and like it's hard to observe a lot of their behaviors and stuff like that because they're literally buried, you know, but they're not just, it's not as though they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
You know, I think that they're doing something. So like, that's something that always has me curious.
That is a very curious thing. When I think of that, I think go back to that tactile thing. Yeah, and
totally.
It's actually so somebody asked me once if lights actually do affect the hormones. Where are some of the hormones located in the human brain? The medulla.
In the skin?
The medulla. Well, yeah, it's actually probably the skin as well. There's actually hormones like throughout different parts of your body, but in the brain itself, your hormones are in the medulla.
Okay.
Yeah, the medulla oblongata. I know people at home going, there's something wrong with this boy's medulla oblongata.
They'd probably say that about both of us, Daniel. We're grown men who are obsessed with reptiles.
And it's not that weird. It's like we were talking about earlier, going back to that Richard thing. He talked about the fact that he likes older women. Richard from Tarantula Collective. I find that more psychologically relevant than the fact that he likes tarantulas. Now, if he was going, I only can get hard if I see a granny with a tarantula, then I would be like, I can't tell you if your kink is bad or good. There's no kink shaming, but you might want to go see a therapist to kind of figure that out and just see if it's like that.
That's fair.
Like, it's like that's fair. Like it's not. We're not judging. Just might want to check that out.
Yeah, you know,
yeah. But it's like it's because it's so much more psychologically relevant because they're really, when you look at trauma, there is no difference between physical and mental trauma with the way the brain sees it. There's no difference in the way happiness is. The way your brain treats happiness is probably the same for no matter what you're doing. So if you're playing football, and that's very interesting. It's like, does stamp collecting and actual reptile keeping activate the same parts of the brain, or do they require kind of a different neurodivergency? But we know that my thinking is dogs and cats are probably not like if you like dogs and cats, you'll probably still like reptiles if you're willing to put in that work to get a reward. If you're not willing to put in that work to get the reward, it's not going to be good for you. It's just not. You're not going to last. It's going to be a quick, oh my God. And then you got to have somebody else verify. So you got to bring people. I do bring people over. This one girl, like I told her, pitch the bitch. She had a beardy. I went and saw her beardy. I'm like, come see mine. And she's like, that's mean, calling her pitch the bitch. So she comes in. I have her feed Calm Fancy. Yeah, Tom Clancy, but he's super calm. And pet shops are Calm a Fancy. He's a little over 500 grams, and he's a yellow normal basically. And so pet shops are Calm a Fancy. and he's very,
That's
very
perfect.
calm. Yeah, it's a perfect.
I like that
And
name.
so she fed him a worm. She fed Hydra. Hydra bit her because Hydra gets very food motivated. Calm Fancy, if you feed him a banana, he'll bite you because he's just like, it's so soft. Otherwise, he's really great about it.
Yeah.
Hydra gets really like, and then it's like, yeah. And she even bit the girl, but the girl didn't care. And then Hydra let her pet her. It's like, so the girl's like, no, we're good. We're good. We're all good. She went to feed Pitch. And then she went to pet Pitch, and Pitch goes, like, what the? And I'm sliding here, damn it. I'm on my desk is on a roller. So the chair's
There
on a
it
roller.
goes.
So everything just started sliding at that moment.
Nice.
So yeah, she goes, yeah, Pitch the bitch. I get it now. It's like, yeah. It's like, yeah, that's Pitch
It's
for
a
you.
good name after all.
It really is. I didn't name her Pitch the bitch to begin with. Her name was Pitch because I've seen her arm wave, and I didn't know that was a submissive move, so she got named for Pitch. But I've seen her arm wave a cricket before she ate it. Very smart girl. Very annoyed at everything. Yeah, just that's the reason why she's my first, and she just loved, like, she's not my favorite reptile. That boy passed away, Peter Banded Skink. I've got pictures of him just sitting right here. He had this massive claw mark in the top of his head from bad shed. But it looks like a bird came down and clawed him. Yeah. Male Peter Banded Skinks right here on the back of their heads will start getting a little, like, almost like balding through bad shedding right there above the mark on the back of their heads. Females that I've seen don't seem to get that. It's very interesting. So that's why I compare it to balding, because it's like the males seem to get that. And that was just bad shed. He was just wild caught, and he was old. He didn't care. He's like, oh, you're not going to kill me. We're good. And literally, he just sit right there and sleep.
That's
like,
cool, man.
Oh my God, he was wonderful.
It reminds me of the Schneider skink that I had when I was a kid. It was like that.
One species I want to get is the Snyder.
They're really
love
cool.
skinks. Yeah. I would love to get a blue tongue, but they're so expensive. And I'm in Missouri, and I'm a scientist. People don't understand that we don't make that much money, but I make more than a biologist does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually do. Like, it's really,
I believe it. I know some biologists, and they're not rich.
Oh God, no. And that's the crazy part. It's like, I see these people on YouTube, and it's like, okay, I like them as a person, but I would almost never take real advice from them, because I can actually look shit up myself. I can get into the scientific research, not just do my own research, but actually look at scientific research. I can understand deeper subject matters. And it's like, I can't. But you don't see scientists on YouTube. You just don't, because they're too busy.
They're too busy doing science. Yeah,
it's very fascinating. If I didn't have the job I'm doing, I only work 40 hours a week. I'm a contract scientist, so I'm only allowed to work 40. So it's like, no matter what happens in the lab, I gotta be out. And it's like, okay. So that's why I can do this. Otherwise, you can't. And then paying, they'll go out and work in the field after school for $15 an hour in Maine. Here in Missouri, people don't understand. Here in Missouri, we're one of the poorest states. That's why the NRBC doesn't do as well, but yet the USARK charity does pretty well here, because they have found that poorer states give more.
Yeah. Is that interesting?
But yet, it is an interesting thing, and people don't understand that. And so it's really interesting when we look at things like that. And
for sure.
And you were talking about before, I wanted you on to do the talk with did you ever see the talk that I did with the herpetologist of California?
Yeah, you sent it to me.
Yeah, did you actually watch it?
I watched half of it.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the issues?
What did you like about it?
I loved it. She was great.
Yeah.
The fact that she didn't blame pet keepers She was easy to talk to. She understood communication so she could be a better leader. And she legitimately did that. And then she didn't blame pet keepers. She's like, okay, so these docks, we have some of the world's biggest docks here in California. Yeah, they come in off of that. Would you agree? Or is there a big problem in California with, reptile keepers?
I honestly don't know.
I don't either.
Know.
But yet
it's
she
hard
doesn't
for me to
think
say
that
because my experience is so isolated, and
yeah,
it's hard for me to say, but honestly,
so
Daniel, I got to get going here pretty soon because I got to go walk my dog before it gets dark. But
what do you do for a living?
I want to
Actually,
cover before I go. What do I do for a living? Yeah. Honestly, my livelihood, I should say, is kind of all over the place. I do a whole bunch of different stuff. Mostly I do a bunch of freelance work. So I do some consulting stuff for like land management and stewardship work. And sometimes I lead stewardship work and land management. So like working on land. And I do some hikes, like guided hikes and stuff like that. And I work with kids sometimes, getting them outside and getting them connected to nature and interested in nature. I do some rattlesnake mitigation work during the summertime.
Why is that controversial?
Why is it controversial? Because I think it's controversial because most people, when they think of rattlesnake mitigation, they just think of rattlesnake removal. And that's honestly not the best thing for the snakes. A lot of times snakes that are removed and moved of a long distance don't survive. And so a lot of the work that I do is, go ahead. Back to the home range thing.
Exactly. And the snakes constantly move when they're uncomfortable.
Yep.
And so
they're trying to get oriented.
Yeah.
And they die from exposure. Yeah. So I don't like to do that part of it. I mostly do consulting. I like talk to landowners and homeowners about what they can do to try and stop attracting rattlesnakes into their space. Because oftentimes they're doing things like they have a rodent problem or they have a water problem that is attracting snakes that otherwise wouldn't want to be so close to people. So that's one thing I do. And I also do some other random things. Like my dad has a family shop in a town not too far from me, about an hour away. And so I go in a couple times a month and I help him out at the family shop just with business stuff. But I don't make very much money at all. I need to figure out how to make more money and I'm trying to figure that out, but I have a good life. It's always interesting. I don't get bored because I do so many different things with my time, and that's good for me. I have worked 9-to-5 jobs in the past, and that's not very good for me. I tend to get pretty bored and pretty depressed. So trying to figure out another way to make a living.
People don't understand how much boredom rules our lives. I know half of what I know because I get bored so easily. And what's nice about reptiles is that you always have something to do.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
If you don't have something to do, either you've only got one reptile or you actually aren't thinking about what you actually need to be doing.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love that about it. It's like, it's always interesting to me. The animals are always interesting. I'm always curious about it. And I love all the little maintenance, that people get, they complain about sometimes.
There's a bar in Denmark, I believe. You know how they kept from fights happening at the end of the night?
How?
Hand out suckers. Simple as that. Boredom rules us. It's so interesting. The only reason why we haven't overthrown the government, we have internet and cable TV.
We're entertained.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they talk about the Rome, in Rome, they had the gladiators. They were trying to keep the populace entertained.
And I think that's a mistake for people to not recognize that, because it's like, okay, so you don't want to listen to me because I sound different. It's hard to keep up with me sometimes, but yet you'll look at somebody like Samson and people will go, well, I want to listen to him because he has all these massive snakes. Well, he's an animal abuser. So as long as we're keeping up with those standards, those fitting in. Animal abusers and people that are going to manipulate you can always step in. What are some of the ways that you might think of mitigating that?
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know much about this kind of stuff. I think about what are some of the questions that you might have that you think needs to be changed? Like, okay, so like we were talking about the intelligent question. Yeah.
And it's such a stupid question. I think it's terrible. I had somebody ask me, I'm like, that's a stupid fucking question. What does it mean to be smart for a skink? Like, it's like Pitch is smarter than other beardies, but I recognize the intelligence of the other beardies. And I just recognize that Pitch is smarter. So it's like, no, Pitch is smart for a beardie. So then what are some of the questions that people ask all the time that you think we need to stop asking those questions and ask different questions? And what questions might we ask? It's like,
that's a good question.
Yeah. So
I mean, one is, I think, like one question that I think about all the time is, or that I hear asked all the time is like, racks or enclosures, like something like that. And I think that is, it can be an example of kind of the wrong question. And it's more about like, well, what's happening in the enclosure? What's happening in the rack? And does it meet the animal's needs? I think in some species, it's easier or maybe only possible to do that in an enclosure versus a rack, but not always true. And so I
would even take that farther. This is a question that if I finally get Dylan on with Dan Levinson, I actually liked Levinson, even though he's usually on Trap Talk. I actually liked him, really, but he asked these questions and stuff. It's like he was like thinking about it as an individual animal, an individual, not just a species. What's best for that individual? Pitch needs higher levels of stimulation than my Comp Bensie's happy just looking out windows and watching a Chiefs game with me. And I seriously, he will actually watch a Chiefs game with me because I think it's the red going back and forth. Well, Pitch needs that stimulation. She will just she go crazy. My water dragon, it's the one thing that I've done here is how bored he is being down, but he doesn't rub his face raw. So it's very interesting. So but that's a species, that could be a species thing. But then it's the individual. It's because he has rubbed his face raw, so we know he does get excited, but he's pretty content with where he's at. But he does seem to be bored. And I would love to get him more mental stimulation. But it's really fascinating that I completely took the opposite approach than what I normally take with my animals. What do you do for mental stimulation? You just stick sticks in there? Is that it?
I mean, that's one thing I do. I think, I try to give them dynamic habitats. So things there's a lot going on in a lot of the enclosures that I use. Live plants, I think, honestly create stimulation because they're changing. They grow, they flower, they put out new leaves. And when they do that, they create different smells and different looks and textures. And I think that's interesting to the animals. Sometimes I move things around. Sometimes if I have like a shed from one animal, I'll put it in the enclosure of another animal for them to smell it and interact with it. I try to give them different types of food than what they're used to so that they have something different, something that makes them think more. Like I like to make fake nests for my snakes, and they'll come and they'll find the eggs and eat all the eggs.
We hear so much about like bearded dragons. Like, mine just stay stationary all the time. Yeah. Mine do not. Mine actually are forced to climb to get to the UVB and move around. Yeah. And I literally have a $5 plate I bought at Target, and I hung it, and she gets on that. She's gotten on that to hide from me ever since she was a baby. Yeah. If I try to feed her, that's where she goes to hide. Yeah. And it's like, so therefore they're healthier. Do you see that in the stimulation that you do? Because I hear a lot of people talk about like mine don't use the full thing. Does yours use the full thing?
I definitely, I mean, almost all of my animals, I think they use all the space that I give them. And
I mean,
I've never thought about like, oh, I'm going to give this animal less space because it doesn't need it. It's like, I'm always thinking the other direction. Like, how can I give my animals more space? Because my experience is that they do use all the space that they're given.
How do you make
some
sure
species are more active than others, but how do I make sure that they're using it?
Yeah.
I think that it depends on the animal. So with some things, like they're not going to move around a lot exactly. The individual, but also the species, it's like some species, they're not going to move out into the open. So like if you create like, here's one area where they want to be, and here's this other area where they might want to be, but in between they have to be fully exposed to get to that other area. They're not going to go because they don't feel safe. So creating cover along the whole length of the enclosure so they can stay hidden but move around is one way. Creating like basking areas, I think, is a good way, because they'll go to that area where they need to go. They need to know, like, this is where I need to go to bask, and to then occasionally move that, move the lights around if you can. I like lights on top of my enclosure so I can move them. That's one thing I like to do too.
So I have a mountain horn dragon, and I was talking to a guy about mountain horn dragons, and we were talking about, like, I was talking to him about the part of the brain that's the ego and ego death, and so we see confidence, and it's like they talk about how hard it is to breed them, and I got to thinking about it. Most reptiles that I know of, I watch a guy from Europe that actually almost every one of his cell fins, his turtle, his actual freaking turtle will climb on him when he lays down. It's like because it's interesting that just because you're a different species doesn't mean that they might not see you as the dominant. Fancy thinks he's second in command of all my reptiles. He really does. But so if a bearded dragon or something besides my savanna monitors is running around on the floor, he's blackbearding and head bobbing. But if I put a bearded dragon right here, I can get this close, and he won't do a thing, because I'm the dominant. I'm the head honcho. He thinks he's second in command. It's still his territory, but it's also my territory, and I have a bigger territory than he does, but it's his territory. And it's very interesting. So we were talking about these mountain horn dragons, and it's like, okay, so you want to, the reason why they might not is because they might be seeing us as the dominant, and then you've taken away that ego already. And so maybe that's the problem. And so getting underneath and trying to figure out a way to build their confidence. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a 3x3 by 60-inch grow tent, and I'm going to try to buy some females and some more, but I'm going to see about getting that as high up in the room as I kind of can, so that they're above me, so that they can feel confident. And so you have to feed them from below so they have more dominant feeling, and they might breed better. Do you see that in anything?
Yes. In the spilotes, the puffing snakes, they definitely want to be elevated and feel a lot more confident if they're elevated. And then another thing I've noticed is that they want to have more depth, more distance between me and them. And so, like, for example, if I have them in a 2-foot deep enclosure, they are stressed, because when I'm at the front of that 2-foot deep enclosure, they can only get as much as 2 feet away from me. Right now, they're in a 3-foot deep enclosure. They've got another whole foot, and their behavior is totally different because they just don't feel as cornered. They don't feel like I'm as close to them. And even though it's just 12 inches of difference, it's enough to change their feeling of safety. And so they're much more relaxed. They're much more relaxed in front of me. They don't go and hide. They'll continue doing what they're doing. And if I open the doors and then go mess with them, then maybe they'll move away. But it's completely different than it was when they were in 2-foot deep enclosures. So that's one thing. Do you
still see that in the captive bred?
Less so in the captive bred, but still, a little bit in the captive bred. I mean, I think it's just natural that they feel cornered, you know. And the thing I've noticed with the captive bred Spilotes though is that they are quicker to become less nervous. But the thing is, when they're still young, they are very nervous because I think it's because they're so small. They're not confident, you know, they're food for everything. Exactly. But once they get bigger and they have more confidence, then they are much more interactive. They're curious. They'll come over, they'll smell me, they'll check me out.
My Savannahs are,
and they're not as defensive.
My Savannahs are a year and a half old to 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I got them when they were like either 2 weeks to 2 months. Like they were like this big.
Yeah.
They're only like 26 to 28 inches right now.
Mm-hmm.
They are tiny for a Savannah monitor, but we know that those will usually live longer than the ones that grow quicker.
Yeah, right, right.
Mine are terrified of everything.
Mm-hmm.
They are terrified of their own shadow. Finishing that story up real quick. Love folded in that, set her on the couch. She's in a leash, has 50,000 things. As a matter of fact, Hate, I named my Savannahs Love and Hate. Mm-hmm. Hate found a trash pile to bury himself, and so he's been happy all day with that. Love's in the newspaper on the thing. You straight from the deal, you go to my bedroom, which I have kind of a night light. It's a thing from a deal, but it's very bright. And then it's actually I have to sleep with something on. Like silence fucking drives me insane. I will wake up to silence.
Yeah.
And so I've got that going. So it's the loudest, brightest thing in the house. But I've kind of closed my laptop a little bit. But there's 50 things that she could hide it, and right there. I literally was in bed for like 10 minutes. So she saw me go into my bedroom. All of a sudden I hear this. And it's like, what the fuck? So I get up, I look around, and I'm like, I can't find her. I go into the living room because it's a 4-foot freaking leash. I put my bearded dragons on there. Always put a leash on your animals if you're going to let them free roam. Because I can't tell you, it will save their life. Even if they hate it, my dragons know to put it on. Otherwise, they know they're not going to get the free roam. So she literally, I found her, dived back. Pitch can't usually get back there, but my Savannah could. And it's like I got these like plastic dressers right next to my bed on the other side. She was so far into those. The leash was completely under the bed. And so I had to pull her out. And I realized she must have gotten scared. Like I said, they're scared of their own shadows, these two.
Yeah.
But she ran into my room knowing when she had 50 hides right there in front of her.
Yeah.
But she ran into my room knowing I was there. Freaking, and I snore, so there's no way if I was asleep that she was not. I actually pulled her out. I'm like, okay, so this is what you want. Okay, so you want to sleep in my room? So I put her in a pile of clothes and I let it go. No issues after that with her. But it was very interesting. So it's like they have trust in me, but they're still scared of everything because they're not big enough to have the confidence. Very interesting, but they'll live longer. So I wonder how long it's going to take them to get that confidence. And yes, if they live to be 5 years old, I will make a video. I need help. My Savannah monitors are still alive at 5 years old.
I'll look forward to that.
I know.
Daniel, I gotta go. It's getting dark, and I gotta go walk my wolf dog. But man, it's been really fun. Let's do it again.
Yes.
I appreciate you, man.
Anytime you want. Anytime.
Cool.
If you're on an episode and you're like, is this neurologically something? Holler at me.
I know who to ask.
Like anything. I will have an answer.
Cool. Awesome. Right on, man. Well, I hope you have a good night.
I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. And great job on the podcast.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. I'll talk to you soon, man. Have a good night.
Talk to you soon. Let me
Bye, everybody.